It can be so hard to be a parent of boys, especially boys on the spectrum, because sometimes their behavior it can be dangerous. And I don't mean that they are malicious. I mean, sometimes when they're overcome by emotions or they're struggling to communicate something, you know, if you have a really small kind of girl on the autism spectrum who like loses her temper and is crying versus a boy who's really big and he's getting upset, it can have a different effect on other people around them. And so I really empathize with parents who are trying to find this like healthy balance of like, well, we don't want to demonize him for his feelings, and yet we want him to learn how to be kind of conscientious about how to manage those feelings. So I just kind of want to say, like, I really empathize with you parents who are going through this. And I think like normalizing feelings is really, really important. And sometimes I do think boys who have an ambivalent relationship with their anger pursue a female identity. And I've seen this more than once. And so I'm really curious about whether or not he feels like he can own and kind of stand in his own sense of entitlement to all the feelings, including anger. And that's not the same thing as acting out our anger, but it is the ability to be okay with getting angry sometimes. You know, when I've worked with young people on the spectrum, they do have really big emotions, and sometimes they've been told and they've experienced that their emotions are disproportionate compared to others, and so they feel embarrassed. And you know, when we try to shove an emotion down or try to block an emotion, it only makes it worse. It's this kind of catch-22 of how to deal with emotions. So I try to say, you know, all emotions are natural and normal, and there's nothing wrong with you. And I try to reframe it as big emotions. Sometimes we have big emotions, and I know sometimes I've heard young people on the spectrum say, like, I'm afraid of getting stuck in my emotions, and that's why they don't want to feel them. So, I mean, there's so many things here that I'm really curious about. Since you have a therapist, I wonder if the therapist can do some, like, really basic emotional identification and being able to recognize the bodily sensations associated with emotions and make space for the emotions. And a book that I recommend may not be appropriate for your son, depending on, you know, what his, I guess, like interest is, and it's kind of like a therapy type of book, but it's called It's Not Always Depression, and it's by Hilary Hendel, and I'll include it in the notes. And she just talks about how emotions work and the science of emotions, and how to actually allow ourselves to have all of our emotions without necessarily physically acting out on them. So I wonder if doing some work around emotions in therapy would be helpful for your son so that he can normalize and own his anger emotions.